So it really is y equals a times e, and then this is r times x minus h plus k. Okay, so this equation is kind of like the graphs we did a month ago when we were in school. But we have an r now, and instead of just a to the x minus h power, we have an e. So just a little bit of reminder, the asymptote is y equals k. And the second thing I want to add before we move on is put h in middle of x values. So h and k are going to be used in our graphs. All right. And when this is a growth function, it's going to look like this. When it's a decay function, it's going to be coming down like this. So growth is up from left to right, decay is down from left to right. Okay. For growth, a will be greater than 0, and r is greater than 0. So one example would be y equals y equals 5 times e to the 4x. So the number in front of e is positive and r is positive. Okay. If it's exponential to k, a is greater than 0, and r is less than 0. So the one thing that changes is r. So this example would be like so on this one, r equals -2. So that will be decay. Remember in the first one we had r was equal to 4. So growth is when r is positive, decay is when r is negative. Okay, so again, just a summary, asymptote is our k value. We use h to find the middle of the x values. Growth goes up, decay comes down, and then a and r determine if it's growth or decay. And I believe we have 2 graphs. Alright, so use a calculator. Your phone calculator is fine, or else I shared a short video on how to use the calculator on your computer. It's actually super easy, so that might be something you look at doing. First equation, y equals -2 times e to the 0.5x. Alright, I'm going to list below here, or right above actually, what a is, what h is, what k is, and what r is. So in this one, a is -2, h is 0, because there's really nothing added to that x. K is also 0, because there's really nothing added at the end of the equation. And r is positive 0.5. So since r is positive, this would be similar to a growth equation. Okay, so the asymptote is the k value. So our asymptote is going to be at y equals 0. I'm going to change colors. If if I zoom into my graph, the asymptote is going to be a dashed line at y equals 0. The reason I'm making a dashed line is because it's really an imaginary line that our graph will never cross. Okay, the domain is all real numbers, and that's going to be true all the time because x can be anything. And the range, we're going to find out as we graph. So h is 0, which means I'm going to put 0 in the middle of my graph. So if 0 goes in the middle, 1 and 2 go on one side, -1 and -2 will go on the other side. So now is where you take your calculator. You would do y equals -2 times e to the 0.5 times -2. Okay, and on your calculator, you will probably have to use parentheses here, depending on the calculator you have. So don't forget about these. And when you type that in, you should get -0.7. Okay, and then we'll do one more where I actually write out. The second number would be -2 times e to the 0.5 times -1. You type then, you would get -1.2. Okay, and then just to save time, when you plug in 0, you would get -2. When you plug in 1, you would get -3.3. And when you plug in 2, you would get -5.4. And then when we graph this, it would be -2, change colors, -2, -0.7, be right about there. -1, -1.2, 0, -2, 1, -3.3, and then 2, -5.4. So your graph is going to come from down here. It's going to come up and then flatten out. Remember, it's going to flatten out as it gets to this dashed line. Never crossing that dashed line. So our range comes from our asymptote. So the graph is below that dashed line, so it's going to be y is less than 0. And that also comes from k. So if it's below the asymptote, it's less than. If it's above the asymptote, it's greater than. And again, the asymptote comes from k, and the range and the asymptote are going to be the same number. All right, and then we got one more graph. So for our last equation, let's list out a, h, and k. So a is the number in front of e. It's 1. Even though it's not written, this is really 1e, or 1 times e. H is the number that is subtracted from x, and it's always opposite. H is going to be the opposite, kind of like it has been all year. So h is actually going to be -1, because it's going to be the opposite of +1. K is -2. And r is +0.4. So we have a, we have h, k, and r. The asymptote comes from k. So our asymptote is going to be at y equals -2. Put that on the graph right away. The asymptote is at -2. So our graph is going to approach that but never cross it. The domain, as always, is all real numbers. The range we're going to find out as we graph if it's going to be above or below that -2. Okay, and then what we do know is h should be our middle number in our graph. So -1 should go in the middle. 0, +1, -2, -3. All right, and if we graph this, when you plug in +1, you would do e to the 0.4 times 1 plus 1. And you probably will have to do a double parentheses, and then you'll do -2 at the end. So when you plug that in, I would probably have to do double parentheses there. And when you put that in, you should get 0.2. Okay. When you put in 0, you should get -0.5. When you put in -1, you should get -1. When you put in -2, you should get -1.3. And actually, I want to add one more number here. Let's do +2 just to get a better curve. If you plug in +2, you will get 1.3. Actually, these numbers are going to give us a better picture. So we'll do those. And again, let's say that we're going to plug in +2. Okay, what you would do is you would take e to the 0.4 times 2 plus 1. You would have to do a double parentheses here, and then do -2. When you plug in your calculator, you should get 1.3. So if we were to graph that, -2, -1.3, -1, -1, 0, -0.5, 1, +0.2, 2, +1.3, you can see that this graph is going to start taking off and going up. So it'll look like this. And our range is going to be y is greater than -2 because it's above that blue line. Right, and that is all. Again, if you have questions on the calculator, you can check my video I made. I posted that alongside this one.